As we dive into the yamas, the first yama that we'll take a look at is ahimsa. Ahimsa is translated as nonviolence, and typically when you see the letter A in Sanskrit, this is a negation of the rest of the word. So in this case, the word himsa in Sanskrit is translated as violence, and therefore ahimsa is translated as nonviolence. In addition to translated directly as nonviolence, ahimsa is translated as kindness and translated as compassion. In other words, ahimsa means not causing any physical, mental, or emotional harm to the self as well as to others. This might seem like a fairly obvious one, to the extent that we're not causing harm directly to ourselves, harm to our neighbors. It will probably keep us out of trouble. But considering this in the scope of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali and the 8-limbed Ashtanga model, the intention of the 8 limbs was to create an environment that is peaceful, that is harmonious, so that it's conducive to a deep state of meditation and finally a deep state of absorption into the self, the capital S self. So I think ahimsa is a really nice starting point. But there are some areas of ahimsa that have probably a more expansive definition than it may seem on a surface level. So considering the capital S self here in my definition, not causing any physical, mental harm to others really means all living beings, including plants, including animals, and really to our overall environment. So we can consider ahimsa on our environmental level with the earth, can consider it on our impact with animals. And in fact, ahimsa is one of the qualities which lead a lot of yogis toward vegetarianism. Now, I'm not giving any dietary advice in this course. And in fact, I know quite a few people who have tried vegetarianism for the moral and ethical reasons, as well as the environmental impact. And they actually found that vegetarianism wasn't quite right for their constitution. They felt low in energy, low in vitality. So in a sense, one could make a case that vegetarianism for that type of constitution is actually kind of violence to the self, to the extent that they're not getting what they need. Now, again, I'm not giving any specific dietary advice, or I don't want to share too much discourse of my own beliefs around vegetarianism and the impact on environment and animals, but it's more to pose the question. I think that's the case with all of the yamas and niyamas and many concepts from yoga philosophy, is that instead of giving a dogmatic list of what to do and what not to do, it's more of framing the right questions to ask. Now, this course is about living yoga off the yoga mat, but interestingly, a lot of the yamas and niyamas do actually present themselves on the yoga mat. In the case of ahimsa and non-harming, this can come up often in a yoga practice. An example might be going deeper and deeper into a pose which is stretching a certain area of the body, can go from a feeling of stretching to discomfort into pain. And in cases like that, the yoga mat's a fantastic laboratory for just noticing these areas of ourselves. And in that example, leaning into ahimsa might mean backing off of that stretch a little bit, particularly backing out of the pain level, perhaps into the discomfort, or in other cases, it could actually mean to stay with it. It could mean doing less harm to myself means creating a certain level of strength, creating a certain level of resilience. Again, this is another example of where yamas and niyamas become more of questions than answers. Now, included in ahimsa is really the golden rule, which is do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and do unto yourself as you would do unto others. Now, I think the second part of this is relevant here because it's worth considering our own inner voice and considering the question if we show up for ourselves in the same way that we would show up for a best friend. So an example might be if a best friend comes to you and says, "Oh my gosh, I just bombed this presentation at work. I feel awful about myself." As a good friend, you would probably offer some words of encouragement and help them feel better. However, if it happens to us, that's typically when we can have some of the negative self-talk. So considering the question of if we show up for ourselves in the same way that we show up for our best friend is creating this inner landscape of nonviolence. The earlier conversation where we talked about vasana, the essence or the imprints, and whether the things we carry lead to bondage or liberation. To the extent that we're kind and compassionate toward ourselves, will typically lead to more of a feeling of lightness, to more peace and harmony. Lastly, I think Ahimsa is a really nice starting point before looking into the next set of yamas and niyamas, because as we start to look closer at these different qualities and aspects of ourselves, they might uncover areas where we notice we're not exactly perfect. We're human beings. So to the extent that we're kind, compassionate, and patient with ourselves, I think creates the right environment to be able to take a look at these different dimensions of ourselves with honesty and be able to use these as tools that help bring ourselves into our personal truth and toward our personal center.